BetMGM, the official sports betting partner of the Washington Nationals, invites you to catch hoops and hockey action at the BetMGM Sportsbook at Nationals Park. With a 4,000-square-foot bar, wall-to-wall video screens, 6 betting windows, and 17 betting kiosks, there's no better place to watch sports all year long. Enjoy daily specials while you place parlays, props, and future bets on all your favorite sports. The Sportsbook is located near the center field entrance of the park. Grab your crew and enjoy all the action you can handle every day from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. You can even make cash deposits and withdrawals for your DC mobile account at any one of the betting counters. Thanks to BetMGM, Nats Park isn't just for baseball anymore. Experience the dozens of betting options and promotions going on daily. Boldly take the court at the king of sportsbooks. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to have fun and play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only, DC only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
This is Holly Fry from Stuff You Missed in History Class. The national sales event is on at your Toyota dealer, making now the perfect time to get a great deal on a dependable new SUV, like an adventure-ready RAV4. Available with all-wheel drive, your new RAV4 is built for performance on any terrain. Or check out a stylish and comfortable Highlander with seating for up to 8 passengers and available panoramic moonroof. You can sit back and enjoy the wide-open views with the whole family. Check out more national sales event deals when you visit buyatoyota.com. Toyota, let's go places.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins.
What is up, everybody? How are you doing this evening, this afternoon, whatever time you're listening to it? I hope you are well, and I mean that, truly. I am so dang excited to have an old friend on the podcast. His name is Jeff Jenkins. He is the vocalist for an amazing post-rock, whatever, hardcore, rock, I don't know, some amazing hybrid of what it is that they do called Codeseven. Codeseven is from North Carolina, and I had the pleasure of spending some time on the road with them, playing some shows with them back in the early 2000s, I want to say. And I've loved this band ever since I got first exposed to their Division of Labor EP back in the early hardcore days, as it were, because they have evolved their sound over time. And their new record is absolutely just astonishingly good. And I spoke about it in my honorable mentions of 2023. It's a record that you absolutely need to pay attention to. It just came out on Equal Vision Records. And so, yeah, you just need to buy it, listen to it. Like, I mean, you're not going to be disappointed in that. The name of the record is called Go Let It In. And we'll obviously play a little bit of a song as we head into the interview. But if you want to reach out to the show, share some music, share some ideas for guests, whatever it is that is on your mind, where you have that burning desire, because I know I have it. There are times where I'm listening to a podcast and I'm like, oh man, I wish I could like interject, or, you feel like yourself talking out loud, in the car as you're being like, oh, I disagree with that point or whatever. But you can email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. I receive all of that. I love to have the dialogue around whatever it is you agree, disagree, or have ideas about. Love that sort of stuff. If you want to support the show for absolutely free, it takes you 30 seconds of your time, maybe 45 seconds if you're slow. You can leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast page, or you can leave a rating on the Spotify page. All of those things help out the legitimacy of this podcast to the worldwide web of the internet, to be able to, just let algorithms know that this thing is a legitimate thing. And I have to let you know about a record that I've been obsessed with. I've been doing these weekly recommendations, obviously, week over week on the show, because not only do I enjoy highlighting certain bands and records that I may have discovered that, whatever came out last year, came out 10 years ago, like whatever. There's no late to the party anymore. If you find out about a band, dive into it and embrace them. This band is called Tomb Mold. The record is called The Enduring Spirit. It came out on 20 Buck Spin last year. this actually was flirting with my top 10 at one point. I'm not much of a death metal dude. Like, that's not where I got my chops, so to speak, as I was, getting into, punk, hardcore, and then eventually metal. Because I didn't start with like the Metallicas and Slayers and Iron Maidens and stuff. I came to them at a little bit older age. And so, even bands like, Obituary or Dying Fetus and that sort of stuff, like I've had to, appreciate them later in my life. But so anyways, I prerequisite, I load that statement up by saying that fact that death metal is just not a genre that I really lean in towards. But this Tomb Mold record is so dang good. It's got all of the elements of just, what classic death metal is, I guess, but then there's a lot of, technicality. There is just a musicianship that really shows song structures, and on top of it all, and I know this is like the nerdiest thing possible, but I'm fairly certain one of the guys in the band is straight edge. And just because I've seen, press photos of them, and he's wearing an X watch, and I'm like, oh man, like playing death metal and being straight edge. Like I love that, straight edge in unexpected places or whatever, which again, I know is like a stupid reason to like a band, but at the same time, it's like, it's my own personal preference. So anyways, check out the Tomb Mold record. Sometimes it's a little bit hard to say that band name. I will put a link in the show notes to have a weekly playlist where I toss all of these recommendations that I've hit over the course of the entire year. You can listen to it, and then hopefully you can discover new music. So that is what I want to recommend to you this week. And let's just go ahead and dive into the conversation with Jeff. He is a very eccentric dude. Anybody that's ever met him or known him or read his lyrics, like, he's definitely not a, tried and true front person, but he is so charming. He's so engaging. Like when you have a conversation with him, you are locked in. And that is exactly what I did with him here. And so, let's talk to Jeff from Codeseven, and please check out their new record. Prior to us, sharing the stage together many, many moons ago in, I think, Canada, we did a little East Coast run.
So much fun. It was so much fun.
It was. And prior to that, I was already a fan of you and your band and what you guys were doing. And I want to say it was around the Division of Labor era where I got exposed to you when I was working at a record label, and people were just like, oh, you'll love this. So listen to it. And, I was immediately captivated by the fact that you guys just seemed weird. And I mean that in a good way, where it was like the singing and screaming stuff was just starting to kind of filter into the, ecosystem. But the way that you guys approached it, in my mind, was very unconventional. And I know most of the time when you're just, whatever, late teens, early 20s, you're just operating off of instinct. You're kind of tripping onto things that you like and what have you. But when you guys were kind of going through that evolution of like the very early era of Codeseven to, incorporating more of, what you were bringing to the table, what, like, were you trying to just like, rip off all the, hardcore bands that you liked, or where were you kind of deriving inspiration from?
It's funny you mentioned the word instinct just now, because that really set me off, made me think a lot about like what kind of headspace we were in at that time. Yes, we were trying to emulate a lot of the contemporaries of ours, but it was a lot of there was a lot of instinct. There was a lot of, okay, so you got three brothers, right? And then you got Dave, who was the screaming vocalist, myself, who was the screaming and singing vocalist, and then Eric Ware on guitar. And the three brothers kind of already had something that was a nonverbal language happening musically. They always have. And that process of when Dave left the band and it was just the five of us, there was a lot of instinct. It was basically like the point at which Eric and I sort of tried to act and think like the three brothers in the band. So in that way, yeah, there was a lot of instinct, but the contemporaries that we were sort of trying to emulate, we always thought they were weird, you know? That's the cool thing about it. It's like we didn't think that they were doing anything from a traditional format. We thought that they were breaking boundaries with the music and trying different recording, whether or not it be recording techniques or, you know, how technology, music production technology was just changing so rapidly around that time. And lots of bands were incorporating things in between themselves and their musical instruments, and between their musical instruments and their amplifiers, and, you know, like adding more drums, taking drums away from, you know, things. Yeah, and then you just had people who just kind of kept that punk ethic, but at the same time changed in all those ways that the technology was changing. And I hope that was us somewhere in the middle there.
No, it was. And I do think that especially as you start to iterate on whatever it is you were trying to initially accomplish. Cause like, you know, every band when they start, they're just like, man, it would be great if we sounded like, you know, Turmoil meets Snapcase or whatever. And then, you know, by the time you release your first 7-inch, you sound nothing like either of those bands because you just don't like that. You just develop.
Yeah. And, you know, having a producer or someone outside the band to tell you, just be yourself, is like one of the most intimidating things. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, wait a minute, I'm still young. I mean, at the time I was a young person still trying to find out who myself was, you know. And I think every single person in every single band has to confront that as far as like, what is my style of playing? You know what I mean? Like, especially if it's something, I mean, I suppose you don't have to confront that if you're just going to be a weekend warrior in a cover band at a local bar. But if you're going to make your own music and sustain yourself over a long period of time, there comes a point at which you just have to kind of have that existential crisis of who the F am I? You know what I mean? Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. And I think what makes, you know, Codeseven unique, besides the fact that you guys were operating, you know, in a scene that was a bit removed from a lot of what was happening, you know, outside your major markets or whatever, but there was a fertile scene there, is that, like you said, it was operating off of this nonverbal communication that, you know, the brothers had with each other. And then you know, the band kind of permeates off of that, where it's like, then you start to have these relationships nonverbally with other band members. And then all of a sudden it's like, we don't even need to speak to each other. And then all of a sudden we're just like, you know, cranking these songs out or whatever.
Yeah. And you know, like what's funny is I think that, as much as we don't consider ourselves like a jam band or a jazz band or anything like that, there's something that those bands do that I kind of have felt like we always do, which is like we jam when we get into a room together. We love to jam, and I'm just so happy with our new album that we finally got a chance to get together and do that again. You know, over the years that we weren't getting together in a room and jamming, we were still best friends, and we were still hanging out with each other, and like we were all building our lives together as a unit of friends, not under the moniker of Codeseven, which was cool because now we, you know, like about 2 years ago, we got together and we were like, hey, let's do an album. And like, that was so much fun to remember, hey, this family of mine, of these, you know, people, we forgot how important that was to just get in the room and not say anything, but look at each other on the drums, give each other, you know, what is it, stank face if something's going wrong.
Yeah.
And you know, like this overexcited, joyous jumping up and down when something's going right. We don't have to stop the music and talk about it. There was a lot of, but prior to that, in that time period that you're talking about, there was a lot of stopping the music and talking about it. And that, you know, that ultimately grinded on to where, you know, like after we released the last album, Dancing Echoes, Dead Sounds, I think a lot of it was done outside of that format of getting together in a room and jamming.
Yep.
And that's where it's probably where things got weird. So,
Sure.
And entering back into this process, we were emailing each other song parts for the most recent album. We kind of did backwards rather than just one day deciding, hey, we're going to write a new record. Let's get in this room together and jam. Like, it started out through a series of angry text messages and, emails of things, like us, belittling each other's song ideas and stuff like that. This is awful. Why would you think that? That sounds like orgy.
Yeah.
So, like, nothing real against orgy, but Codeseven shouldn't sound like orgy.
Right.
Anyway, you get my point. Like, it's like we got the process right by going about it backwards and working back into that format of, hey, we sound good when we're together in a room jamming,
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is very true because as you become a more, and I'll use this in air quotes, a professional unit, and you start to, create in these different environments because of the way that the band is touring and all these other outside implications. Like, when you strip it down to, it's nuts and bolts, it's like, oh yeah, like what we do is special because we literally, turn loud amps on and, mess around with each other. And, maybe out of the 3-hour practice, we're like making fun of each other for an hour, but like, that's also productive.
But out of that 3-hour practice, you got at least 2 or 3 minutes or moments or whatever they may be of something keepable and joyful and real. And I think that's what's cool about us. I felt like every band could save a lot of time if they just find those moments and record every single time that you're together doing anything and try to scrap those moments together into some kind of, try to craft it and glue it together into some larger piece. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of putting the focus on you as an individual, because, there's, certain aspects of your life and more of just by existing alongside of you and talking to you. But were you actually born and raised in North Carolina, or did you come up somewhere else?
No, I was born and raised in the town that we all grew up in, Winston-Salem. I was a North Side kid, and the rest of the band were all from the South Side of town. So,
oh, you were literally on the wrong side of the tracks.
Yeah, I grew up. When I was growing up, my family had a racing business. I like to. I got used to traveling around the country at an earlier age, or at least around the region. I didn't go around the country very much, but when I was a kid, I would go like from North Carolina as far away as like we would go to Pennsylvania. We would go to New York for my dad's racing business. So. And,
yeah.
And I remember that because my dad had a race car, there were, and he raced throughout the summer. He raced locally every weekend. And there were times throughout the week where he would have the race car testing in the garage, which is about, maybe about 100 yards behind my house. It was very loud throughout the neighborhood. So this was the moment that I could crank up my amplifier in my room and nobody would hear and ridicule because the racing engine was just so incredibly loud. So that was kind of fun to, like not have to play my guitar at a minimal volume. I got to crank it up as a kid.
Right.
And I will forever, because my mom was in the house while that was happening and not in the garage, I will forever be grateful to my mom. For having to put up with You Shook Me All Night Long by AC/DC that many times.
God bless her. God bless her.
No normal parent would sustain that kind of abuse, from their child. But my mom was a trooper, and she always supported me. She's the one that took me back and forth to guitar lessons. But yeah, it was really cool. And so I was from the north side of town, and they were all from the south side of town. And I got pretty burnt out. Not that I was burnt out on the racing or anything, but I would remember as a kid when I would go to these racing events with my family, I would never watch the race. And that's kind of sad because my dad put a lot of effort into that race car. I should have been watching the race, but I was always like walking around trying to find other kids with heavy metal t-shirts on. Right.
You were like, racing is cool and stuff, but like, where's Where's the Black Sabbath shirts? Where's the AC/DC shirts?
Yeah. Well, I discovered some of my favorite bands that way. Like, I didn't know who Slayer was before I was like 10 or 11 years old. And being a 10-year-old and having a mom who let you run around the race grounds where all the concessions are and everything, seeing these kids with long hair, I was like, what is Slayer? And then, you know, like, little to my mom's knowledge, I don't know how or where I would have obtained a Slayer album. You know, like things like that. Things like, you know, I was like, what is... At the first I saw it and I was just like, Sepultura. And I was like, Sepultura. And then my life was changed, you know, like forever.
Yeah. Was there any, I guess, hope or angling of you, you know, continuing on in your father's footsteps as far as, you know, doing the racing biz, as it were?
Yeah, there was a big impediment there. I was dumb as a lug when it comes to automobiles. Like, at age 16, you could have told me that I had bad air in my tires, and I would have been like, oh, no. You know, like, you would have told me that I need to get turn signal fluid, and I would be like, okay, where do I get that? You know, just
weren't
about it.
Yeah, wasn't taking it.
Automobile. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how to, you know. I've rarely had luck with cars. To this day, I still don't really know what's going on. I think there's just like little people inside the hood that make it go bing, bing when you start it up and go, you know.
Yeah.
So automobiles, not my wheelhouse, but music and electronics I've always been fascinated with. So, and, you know, I think if you mean following my father's footsteps, the creative and crafting aspect, yes, I'm very much like my dad. Whereas my dad was into combustible engines, I've been into like small end electronics and guitar effects and things like that.
Right. You're like, I'm just doing this on a different medium. It just happens to not be cars.
Yeah. It happens to be circuit bending and modding things. That's what I'm into. So.
Right.
Yeah.
This is random, but did you ever get into, you know, like ham radio and all of that aspect of it, or was that not part of the journey?
As far as electronics go, no, I wasn't really into that. But I mean, I was a senior in high school and I failed my electronics class. At the time, I was just not into it. And then a decade or so later, I started to really get into it. When Codeseven was like touring and things like that, I started to like want to know how these things worked. You know, like every night we get up on stage, we plug these things in, and they get loud or they make wacky noises. And I just wanted to know what it was that was doing that, and like kind of open that field for myself. So I really got into circuit bending maybe about, you know, I'd say maybe early 2000s to early to mid 2000s was when I was really just like, I want to tear everything apart. Of course, I've been like that since I was a kid. Like, I can remember there was this giant G.I. Joe thing that my parents got me for Christmas when I was like 9 or 10. And it took them so long because they put it together under the thing. I was like, it took them so long to put it together. And I had it like torn apart that night, Christmas night. It's like, I don't know why I did that, but.
Right. You like the idea. And I think that kids innately have this notion to either build stuff or take apart stuff. But you really were curious because not only did your environment lend itself to it, but then you were also just innately curious about that stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about it the other day, Ray. It's really funny. Like, you probably did some dangerous stuff when you were a kid, right? Like, of course you did.
Yeah, every kid does. Yeah, every kid does something stupid. I think my favorite dumb thing that I did, which, you know, on a sliding scale of dumb things is like pretty low, but like, I definitely was, I wouldn't call myself a pyromaniac, but I definitely was entranced by flames, and the idea of melting army men with WD-40 was amazing. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I was there. My brother and I totally did that. He was about 5 years older than me.
Perfect.
And, we totally did that, yeah. One thing I thought about, though, Ray, is like I had finally came to a realization this past Christmas that I am lucky to have all of my fingers, because my dad's racing business and the fact that he worked third shift, and there was a good 3 or 4 hour window from when my mom got home and when my family all got together for dinner. And my brother was usually off running around with his buddies. I remember being alone in my dad's garage with his belt sander and grinder and making swords and like Freddy Krueger knives and things like that. Like, I shouldn't have been allowed to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
if I was my dad, I would have been incredibly mad. And then, like, I think what happened is when my parents got a divorce, my dad had to move all the stuff away. And I think he found that had a large 55-gallon drum. And for some reason, I thought that I was going to stash all of my swords and my dangerous shit inside that 55-gallon drum because you couldn't really, like had a small hole inside of it. I'm sure my dad found that and was just like, what in the hell is this?
Right. What is my child doing with all of these knives and these, instruments of torture?
Yeah, because, there was just like scrap metal laying around his racing garage and stuff like that. I should not have been allowed to do that. If my parents are hearing this, they're hearing this for the very first time.
And sometimes it's absolutely better for them to know, 30, 40 years in retrospect rather than, in real time, they may have been concerned and you could not have played with those knives.
Still got on my fingers. So.
Let us discuss our friends at rockabilly.com. They're an incredibly important company for a multitude of reasons. One, they want to give you a promo code that gives you 10% off of your entire order, which that means awesome. You save money by buying stuff that you want. Use the promo code 100 words or less, 10% off your entire order. They are a company that supports bands because they sell officially licensed merch. And I don't care what band you're into, you will be able to find stuff from them there. Say you're being like, you know what? I want a Metallica and a Grateful Dead shirt and, how about a Bob Marley shirt? Like, boom. All those things you can buy at one spot. And all officially licensed. It ships from the Midwest here in the United States of America. It is great people that work there. One day I will make it out to their headquarters in the Minneapolis area and then be able to just, steal a bunch of merch. No, I promise I won't do that. I've bought stuff from them before. So, we're cool. But anyways, I love Rockabilia. Use the promo code 100 words or less for 10% off of your entire order. Go shopping to your heart's content. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all want more time in our lives, whether it's like, dang, I wish I had like another hour to, play video games or read more or get outside or whatever it is. I know myself that I actually get questions a lot in regards to this podcast. How do you fit it in your day? And like, how do you do the interviews and all that stuff to be able to then balance the rest of my life from my work and, playing in a band, and I have a family, all of these things. But that is why therapy is so awesome, because it helps you be able to sort out your life to focus on the things that, for one, really matter to you, and two, try to find more time for those things that you love. That is why I love working with BetterHelp, because if you need to find a therapist, they're there for you. So give them a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient for you, and they can be suited to your schedule. And you fill out a brief questionnaire, matches you up with your own personal therapist. And if you do not like that experience, you can switch it. No problem. No questions asked. It's great. So learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray today to get 10% off of your first month. It's an offer just for you, the listener of this podcast. That's betterhelp.com/Ray. I wanted to ask in particular about, I know you're, like you said, when you were wandering around the racetracks and kind of getting exposure to, metal and stuff like that. When did the more, I guess, like independent minded stuff, whether it's, like punk hardcore, like when did that stuff start to matriculate into your brain? And was it exposed to you via your brother, or was it, kids at school? What was the vibe there?
Certainly not the kids at my school. So, my brother was an influence on me. My brother and his friends, they often listen to things like Black Sabbath and, like I mentioned, like AC/DC. I discovered pretty independently, metal, heavy metal, and thrash on my own. And when I discovered thrash, I was like, this is what I want to do. When I first heard Anthrax, I was like, no doubt, this is, and then things like Megadeth and Slayer, I was like, this is where I am, this is who I am, this music speaks to me. But there was no one in my school really that got into that except the kids on the soccer team. And so I went to hanging out with the kids. I went from hanging out with the kids that were just kind of, they were drifting away from classic rock into this sort of northern rural classic rock state of mind that I was like, that's cool, but that's not who I am. That's a little too close to, too close to the past. And I felt like that thrash and metal, that was my future. You know what I mean? I could have stayed and done things that were a little bit more hard rock oriented, but I kind of evolved from that hard rock into thrash pretty fast when I discovered Anthrax. And, there was also the band Corrosion of Conformity, which they were a North Carolina band. And I think I had found out, hey, there's this, did you know that there's this heavy metal band that came from North Carolina? And I was just like, what?
Right.
And they just sounded so massive. And I think that they kind of helped usher me into what was punk and thrash. Their early stuff kind of ushered me into that. And from then on, I was like, this is who I am and who I want to be. And so I started working at a record store when I was about 18, and I discovered other people who were like that, and the guys in the band just so happened to be those other people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I do love what you're talking about in regards to discovering a band that is, from your area or local, that will not only give you a sense of, pride about, oh, cool, like this band's from the town next to me, but then it's also the connective tissue that you can pull together where it's like, oh yeah, they ended this year or whatever. And then now, me and my friends can kind of carry on the torch. Not like you would ever be able to articulate that, but just that localness really, really is inspiring.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think whenever you're in that position, you sort of look like, hey, the pond is a little smaller. There's like a big fish in a little pond. I think that if you feel like you and the people that your peers, whether or not they be your bandmates or your band and other bands like sister bands, you know what I mean? Like when you feel like you're not alone in that smaller area, that's when the fire is really getting fueled. That's what's created some of the greatest scenes, quote unquote, scenes in the nation and around the world. Is just that feeling of, hey, this area, we have something to be proud of, the type of music and the amount of artists there are emerging from this area. I think that's what's kind of fueled some of the best scenes in rock and roll.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And did you, as far as your academic pursuits, did you care about school? Was there a path for you from the that side of things, or was that school just kind of, an impediment for the things that you were really interested in?
Probably the latter.
Okay.
I had about 6 months of, what would be junior or, technical college, studying, architectural drafting, and, it's not for me. And then immediately, because when I was in high school, we had our high school was pretty well funded because Winston-Salem is where we're from is like a big tobacco town, and the high school that I was in was really well funded for as far as getting the latest technology. And we had computers in our shop class, where my shop teacher encouraged me to go to pursue after graduation architectural drafting. Said, you're really good at this. And I was like, yeah, AutoCAD's great. The program itself was easy for me to use. And so then I got to a place called Guilford Tech and discovered that they hadn't even integrated, at that time it was 1995, and they hadn't even integrated those AutoCAD technologies yet. And they wanted you to immediately start working on a drafting board. And I couldn't draw a straight line, freehand a straight line, and it was just I couldn't figure out these things that they were trying to get me to figure out manually. And that was just about the first, within that first 3 months of the school, Codeseven had developed completely and started touring. And when I say touring, we were playing shows that would have kind of cut into the time that I should be at school.
Right.
And you want to know what happened? It's so funny. The following year, after I cut out of Guilford Technical Community College, the following year is the year that they integrated that everyone must start out platform of like strictly working with a CAD program on a computer. And I was like, oh, shit.
Right.
Excuse my language. I'm sorry. I don't want to cuss on your show.
No, it's okay. It's completely fine. You can express yourself however you want to.
I mean, but yeah, like had that program been implemented at the college earlier, who's to say I might have just fallen in love with it, you know? But the fact that I'm working on discovering vanishing points and tangents and stuff like that on a drafting board with a pencil and a ruler, I was so much more into music at the time too. I think that I would have probably continued to pursue those architectural drafting things, but the band was definitely not going to be as fundamentally a part of my life had I just fallen in love with architectural drafting and, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as you started, I'm guessing, or is Codeseven like literally your first band, or did you have different iterations of things you tried to put together prior to that?
Yeah, I had never tried to put anything together myself, but I started out in a band that did like, you know, hard rock. Then I shifted immediately to a band that did, because I was also into industrial music and like loud, gnarly stuff. Like I think around about the same time as I discovered those other bands that I mentioned, I probably discovered things like, you know, Nine Inch Nails and Ministry. And I was in a band that did we were like a cover, Ministry, Nine Inch Nails cover band kind of, but we had a few originals, and it was really great because the guys were so sweet, and they were so supportive when I told them that, hey, I'm also going to be singing in another band while I'm playing guitar in your band. So playing guitar in the Nine Inch Nails and Ministry type band was great, but those guys came to see me sing and perform for the first time with Codeseven, and I thought it was so sweet how they let me down. Like they let me down so gently. They were like, they didn't tell me, and like looking back on it, I realized how terrible I was of a guitar player, and they didn't want to tell me, hey, you're a terrible guitar player, even though I was. But they came to afterwards. They called me after they saw the Codeseven show, and they were like, look, man, we think you're a really great fit for this Codeseven band. And I was just like, oh, thanks. And then later on, I realized it's like, oh, yeah, I would listen back, and I was like, oh, yeah, that was not good. I said, that was me. That was my guitar part. That was sounding so bad. So it was a nice way for them to tell me, hey, you kind of suck. Stay away from guitar.
Right. They let you down gently. They're like, I think your talents are better used on another thing. And
you want to know something? Had they not done that, I wouldn't be as okay. I'm still really close with one of the guys. We're best buddies. His name's Mike, and Mike and I joke around all the time. Mike was also a very big influence on me at the time because he lived in another city. And when I discovered Mike, I think Mike turned me on to the band Tool, and I will forever be grateful for that. You know. But there were other things that like Mike was great about doing, and he got me a job at a music store. He got me. He would just he was so generous about turning me on to bands that I'd never heard before, and he was I think Mike was actually a few years older than me. So the fact that and can I say his last name on the air?
Absolutely.
Okay, his name's Mike Lawrence, and I would remember going to his apartment for the first time and just being like, he had a wall of CDs, and I was like, who are these bands, And Mike and I met actually because of an ad in a local music periodical thing. I was really big at doing that when I was a teenager, like looking at who's looking for a guitar player in a band or something like that.
Got it.
Just because I wanted to get out, like I wanted to get myself out there and start making music. That's basically all I knew. So it's like, I can't make music because I don't have drums and I don't have a bass,
Right. You, as a person, just like spending time with you and stuff like that, like hearing the drive that you had, like you said, to, I guess, get out and meet other people. There is that sort of push-pull nature, especially of people that get interested in independent music. Like not everybody is a social butterfly. There's a lot of, introverts that happen there. Where would you, you've always struck me as a person that, like, I would say leans a little bit more on the introverted side than the extroverted side. But, how are you balancing that as you were getting out there and meeting other people?
Yeah, I think that it's very, very funny you should mention that, because I feel like there were a lot of things that like I did then that every person kind of has to go through, probably. Every person that's like not being a kid anymore and becoming an adult, is a pretty big hurdle, and just learning how to properly communicate with people it gives me so much anxiety, the idea of you have to talk to people. But then, like, it's funny because we consider that sort of like this, this area of like, I need to get out into the world and meet people. But at the same time, that just kind of instills, I think, in everyone just a little bit, instills a little bit of fear, because we're just so comfortable in our own skin, in our own place. And if you want the truth, and this is going to sound like I'm endorsing drugs or endorsing marijuana, I was really high. I was really high a lot of the times, and like I think that like my perspective of being introverted may have lent itself to being paranoid, or maybe just sort of flighty, and like I'm going to stay in the van. Like when we would go places and I like hang out with other bands, like I wouldn't just immediately jump out of the van like, hey, we're here, everybody. I would like feel people out, and like, just mainly just, here's my rule is like, if somebody's going to talk to you and be kind to you, you should always give them that same amount of emotional investment in return. Otherwise, you're missing out on a lot of great opportunities to meet friends and make friends, And when we would tour, I always found it was the bass player. And in the case of Taken, it was in fact Nick that I can recall meeting the first time. And, Nick, who I can recall making a very immediate connection with when we got out of the van, And it's just like you can meet people and make these connections and also be introverted. But if they're going to give you the investment, don't shrug your shoulders and kind of stare at your feet, look them in the eye and shake their hand, It's what you can do as a human being.
Yep. Yeah. No, and I think that's what you're talking about. I mean, there's a lot of elements in there that are interesting of what you're saying, just like the ability to, get outside of yourself. And like, even if it's, the idea of, all right, I'm going to get out of the van and I'm going to socialize a little bit so I can obviously meet the rest of the people. But then to your point, when you're there being like, yes, you were literally getting all of me, even though I know it's taking a lot of effort to connect on that side of things. But it's, you start to be able to develop a little bit more of a recognition of what sort of person you are, and like when you need to be like, no, I do need to be in the van because I can't handle this right now,
Yeah. Another thing is that like when I'm on stage, like I was looking at older pictures of myself and I was like, wow, I really chose to dress weird. But then I look at pictures of everyone else that I was with at the time and it's like, I look normal. You know what I mean? And things change and, fashions change. But like the one thing that's always bothered me is when an artist covers their face. I think the only band that I would really like to do that, it's not Kiss. It's Gwar. You know what I mean? If Gwar doesn't have on masks, I don't want to see, like I know that they did that whole like ex-cops things, but like Gwar is the only band that I feel like is allowed to do that in my mind,
Right.
I see bands that covered themselves up and like that to me, I feel like that's like the hero's mask, you know what I mean? Like, but like the fact that Codeseven's music was exactly who we are, I felt like, I'm not going to attempt to, there was a thing about when people had their, I don't know if you can see the camera, but people had their hair like way, way down in their eye and like,
oh yeah, the swoop haircut. Yeah.
I felt like I was like, I was always under pressure from outside people. Like there was a time when I was a teenager and I I was really into things like Korn at the time. And I think I really, right around the time Codeseven formed, or maybe even when I was in this band with the industrial band, I was thinking like I need to get dreadlocks. So this girl I was staying with at the time, she said, get you some beeswax and put it in your hair. And I'm like looking back at pictures of myself and I was like, that is not who I am. Like I've always mastered the art of the 7-year-old boy haircut, and every time that I stray from that, it just looks awful, no matter what.
Right.
So I've always like since since I discovered that, I've gone back to the haircut that I had when I was about 7 years old. So, and I've just stuck with that. So,
right. If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. And the type of clothes that I've worn, yes, I wore JNCOs, but there was a time where I discovered that JNCOs were not how I felt comfortable anymore. So I think rather than JNCOs, I'd always kind of envisioned myself as the guy who wore camouflage camouflage cargo pants cut off at the knees. Like that's kind of always been my personality. Like I'd always get away with wearing camouflage cutoffs at the knees,
Right.
Just, like the fact that I never spent a lot of money on my appearance. I know that there were bands at the time that were under a lot of pressure from labels to wear these things that, wear these designs that people have designed for you and not what's in your own closet. That's always weird for me. So that's when you were talking about this impression to be yourself. I'm not saying you can't be yourself if you do those things, because obviously bands that wear masks are themselves, but that's just not who I am, and I'm not going to knock anybody else for doing that.
Right. Yeah, you're not going to, if you try it and you feel uncomfortable with it, it may take you longer because of, like you said, all those outside pressures to not do it. But then the moment that you don't do it, and then you feel like you're like, oh, so this is actually me. Like me trying out this other thing, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
Totally. When you started to, tour, and obviously Codeseven, you guys spent a lot of time on the road, post the rescue and everything like that. And did you take to touring, I guess, easily, or was that something that you had to kind of, learn to like over time?
I think I was used to the travel aspect of it because of traveling around with my family when I was a kid. But I wasn't used to the being a grown-up part of it. Being a grown-up was very, very difficult for me at first on the road. I relied a lot on the guys in the band, and I was a mooch, and I was just a total crust punk of a human being to be around. And the fact that I probably went dumpster diving while all of them were asleep to sustain myself on the road, that was probably not very easy for them to deal with all the time. It just wasn't a thing where I thought I could keep, I monetarily and financially, I couldn't sustain myself on the road. I was often in debt, when I come back. And that wasn't for, any exorbitant reason. It's just, there are a lot of things that I should have invested with the band that I didn't invest. I was just I'm just along for the ride. And I know that was burdensome for them in so many ways. It is burdensome if there's a band member that financially doesn't carry his or her weight, but that was very unfortunate for them that they had to deal with that. So I was not a grown-up, but yes, traveling. I love staying in hotels, or I love sleeping in people's floors. I love showering in very weird places.
Right. Yeah, you're adept at the chameleon-like nature that sometimes you have to, not sometimes, most of the time you have to adopt regardless of, whether you're staying in hotels or not. It's just that idea of stepping into, it's well, I'm going to be, a river, and I'm going to have to learn when to ebb and flow appropriately.
Yeah. And what I think is kind of cool, now I have a job where I get to help bands feel like they're at home. That's my job where I work. So I work in a music venue, and I get them, we're kind of centered on the artist's comfort at the music venue as one of our key philosophies. And I think it's cool because there's nothing worse than showing up to a music venue and no one in the music venue cares why you're there. No one knows what's going on. So that's something that the place where I work, we focused to just really accentuate how important the artists are, from making them feel at home when they arrive and when they leave. So
you need to point your web browser to evilgreed.net, because they are an amazing web store solutions provider for bands and record labels. But you, as the end consumer, you benefit greatly from ordering from them, because what it means is that you can order shirts, CDs, vinyl, tapes, hoodies, whatever it is, from a very specific point of view of bands and labels. Like, they don't welcome everybody in the door. They don't sell everything from every band. They have a focus. Like, I'm just going to name some record labels that'll give you a nice swath of who it is they work with. Whether it is the Flesner, whether it's Flat Spot Records, whether it's Metal Blade, whether it's Neuro Recordings, whether it's Sargent House, Ven Records, Triple B, like, it goes up and down the board. But the cool thing about it is, like I said, they have a very specific point of view. So if you listen to the show, I can guarantee that you will like a lot of the merch that is sold there. On top of it, they're located in Germany. The shipping rates here in the United States are very advantageous for us right now. So order from them. And I've got stuff here in California in like 7 to 9 days. It's spectacular. And they obviously ship worldwide, so that makes it even easier for you. And you can order from all of these different bands and stores, and it's all in one spot for you, so it makes it very, very convenient. So go to evilgreed.net, shop away. Like, maybe just you want to pre-order the new Full of Hell record. They got that. Yeah, it's great. So anything that you're looking for that's heavy and artistic, they got there. evilgreed.net, shop away.
BetMGM, the official sports betting partner of the Washington Nationals, invites you to catch hoops and hockey action at the BetMGM Sportsbook at Nationals Park. With a 4,000-square-foot bar, wall-to-wall video screens, 6 betting windows, and 17 betting kiosks, there's no better place to watch sports all year long. Enjoy daily specials while you place parlays, props, and future bets on all your favorite sports. The Sportsbook is located near the center field entrance of the park. Grab your crew and enjoy all the action you can handle every day from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. You can even make cash deposits and withdrawals for your DC mobile account at any one of the betting counters. Thanks to BetMGM, Nats Park isn't just for baseball anymore. Experience the dozens of betting options and promotions going on daily. Boldly take the court at the king of sportsbooks. BetMGM and GameSense remind you to have fun and play responsibly. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only, DC only. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Kind of on that same tip, when, Codeseven was coming off, like, especially after the early releases with the Music Cartel, the, subsidiary of Earache, or not subsidiary, the, like, I guess off branch of Earache Records. That was always a weird label for Codeseven to be a part of. I mean, I understood why you were connected to it, but as the business implications started to, cook with the band, where it's like, even as simple as, like, oh, we're getting paid $150 to play the show or whatever, how did you, I guess, interact with the commerce side of things with the band? Was that something that you kind of just kept at arm's length, knowing that obviously it's happening and you endorse it? But, how did your, I guess, relationship with the business side go?
I was non-present. I bore no factor in those decisions. I was just always happy to be there. Those decisions were usually carried out by the Tuttles, the three brothers, and Eric. And in the early days, those decisions were carried out by Dave and the other guys in the band. And when we parted ways with Dave, we sort of, like, that's when we sort of tried to, maybe we need a manager. And so our manager, John Bambino, we ended up working with him, and he just, he helped facilitate things so kindly and so easy. But, like, there's nothing worse than having someone in the band like me at the time, which I'll tell you a story about, like, going to meet with this management team or something like that somewhere in Los Angeles one time. And I remember it was like LL Cool J's manager, or maybe KRS-One's manager or something like that. But, and I don't remember his name, but I remember going into his office and, like, it was so much in my mind. It was so much like this, like, classic figure of, there's a Boston song where it's something about a guy, like, smoking a cigar, and, like, you see this guy, hey boys, you're going to go far. That, like, classic character of a manager. Or yep. Yeah, there's a song called Have a Cigar by Pink Floyd. It's essentially like, yeah, you guys are going to go far,
Right. And you got something, kid.
Yeah. And so, like, I maybe subconsciously, like, sabotaged the entire situation because they had free coffee. And the lady just kept bringing in coffee because I just kept emptying out the coffee urn. And I drank so much. I just pounded black coffee cup after black coffee cup. And everything was great. The meeting was over. And, like, I just don't know exactly how I acted during that meeting. But I just remember the funniest part about it all is that, like, as we're leaving, the guy or somebody tells us, like, yeah, there's a school next to us when you guys are leaving. It's going to be letting out. Like, the school kids are coming around. Their parents are going to be driving around to pick them up or whatever. So you guys are going to, like, as soon as we pull out of this lawyer's parking lot, I'm in the van, passenger seat behind the van. I'm behind the seat behind the passenger seat, like where you open the door, roll the door back. And so as these parents are picking up their kids, we're, like, in that same line pulling out of the parking lot. And I just open that door, and just this vile, black, billowing river of nasty coffee just comes spewing out, like, right at these kids' feet as soon as they're, like, and they're all dressed in uniforms, like school kids' uniforms and everything.
Yep.
And I just remember, like, it was like guar projectile vomit of nothing but just black coffee all over the place as soon as I opened that door. And I mean, while that was funny, that was also, I was being a liability for the band. I shouldn't have acted like that, you know. And I shouldn't have drank all that coffee and then just, like, as we're leaving the parking lot, just leave a mess all over these kids while they're getting to their parents. I didn't puke on the kids, but it was just like, ooh, look at what the hell, you know, like, kids are getting in their car, like, and here's this punk rock guy opening up a door and puking all over the place.
Right. No, I love that story just because it exemplifies, like, there is that real spectrum that exists in bands where it's like people like you who, you know, didn't have as much of a connection with the, you know, the business side of things, but, like, you understood it was important. And then you had people who were, you know, like, you probably joked around where it's like, oh my gosh, like, Jeff, are you sabotaging this whole meeting because you drank, like, 19 cups of black coffee? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and I feel like whenever the idea of discussing those monetary implications of the band have come up over the years, I will always deflect it. I was like, oh, you need to go talk to him. Somebody will come up to me at a club, hey, who do I need to settle with? Oh, you need to go talk to him. Or, hey, what, you know, I heard you guys are working with blah. Oh, yeah, you need to go talk to him. But what happens is when I meet these people who are, you know, like, on the business end of it, as people, I always end up asking them, like, about themselves rather than the music. And, you know, how's your family? How's your kids? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
By the way, Ray, do you have kids?
I do have a child. He's 12. Okay. Yep.
Oh,
yes.
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, it's so funny you say that, not to interrupt your train of thought, but, like, that is like such a vivid memory of mine to you, where it's like you do kind of try to push aside the, you know, more superficial stuff. And you really try to be like, hey, I've got you for 5 minutes. Like, I want to talk to you about, like, you know, the like black holes or the deepest, darkest, intimate secrets that you're willing to share with me. Like, not in a you know,
I know what you mean. Thank you.
But yeah,
that's
but
kind.
you, and I think that your natural inclination to do that, you know, helps not only humanize you, but, like, it really draws people into you. And I think that's why, I mean, frankly, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to share this, where it's like, oh yeah, Jeff is, like, you know, kind of a off the beaten path dude. He's kind of weird. Like, he's out there. But, like, I think that people are disarmed by your just being like, hey, let's, like, get into the real meat of it all. And I think that some people don't know how to react to that, I'm sure.
Yeah. I ended up talking to some fans at the show the other night in New Jersey about potentiometers. Do you know what potentiometers are?
No, hit me.
Yeah, it's a knob on a guitar.
Okay.
And you know how I'm all about circuit bending and stuff. I was just talking to them about the most random stuff about circuitry and, like, you know, resistors and capacitors and things like that. And I don't even know why I was talking. I mean, like, they were like, we really like your band, blah, blah, blah. I was like, yeah, well, you know, like, that's interesting that you should say that because blah, blah, blah. And, like, the story just spun off, and it's just me sitting there telling them about, like, this gadget that I had that I was using on stage at the time and, like, how I made it myself or whatever. And, like, so, I mean, like, that's, you know.
That's what you care about.
Yeah, I'd much rather talk to somebody about something that's very valid rather than be the guy from third eye blind who is just like, why isn't everyone talking about me and the fact that I'm dating this celebrity? You know?
Right. Yeah. You're like, that's not only is that not me, but that doesn't concern me. And, yeah.
But, you know, I'm learning to be a little bit more outgoing because I understand that, you know, everybody has to do that in order to survive these days. It's a world of social media that kind of like it implores you to outwardly push yourself and create yourself in the digital framework of things. So like we're trying to create more of a social media presence, and I think I'm going to be a part of that going forward.
Nice. Well, I'm glad you're comfortable with that. There's a few other things I wanted to hit on and normally I don't really ask the like, oh, you know, songwriting, vocal melody questions and stuff like that, because I feel like sometimes that can get a little esoteric and, you know, frankly, sometimes boring. But like your melodies that you come up with are so inherently like Codeseven. And like, I know that it's difficult to be anybody but yourself, but like, this is just a real basic question, but like when you're coming up with these melodies, and I know you're working with your band members and then sometimes producers to help, you know, coax out whatever ideas you may have, but like, are you coming up with stuff like, you know, are you literally like humming them? Do you hear it in your head? Like I said, I know it's a sort of basic and maybe inane question, but like, how are you coming up with like the initial thought?
That's a good question. And to answer your question, I'm going to flip it around on you, because now I want to ask you, Ray, when you're crafting a song with your band, there are points at which you have lyrics first, correct?
Yep, correct.
Okay. I have a kind of an equilibrium that balances toward creating the melody first and then filling it in. And this past album, I kind of wanted to do the opposite of that. And I think that helped me, the fact that prior to, I'd only been like, okay, melody first, then fill in those points of the melody with something that sounds phonetically similar to the way that you want your melody to work. And that was cool, but you mentioned the word esoteric. These lyrics were basically just, you know, not Jackson Pollock thrown, but sort of like sporadically thrown at the wall to see what sticks. And what's cool is if something like that means something to somebody, that's great. But the only content that I really focused on writing about was, you know, our sort of or at least initially writing about before creating the melodies, was sort of some of the metaphysical things that had happened to us, like concerning things like UFOs and ghosts and, you know, out-of-body experiences and you know, just the paranoia of a real human being dealing with some of those things. But during the past 2 years, the album, I was sort of like, okay, so I'm going to start writing some lyrics and crafting lyrics first. And in the process of doing that, like the melodies kind of came fluidly through the rhythm of the pentameter of the meter of the syllables in the phrase that I might be saying, you know? So that's kind of how I crafted the last album. But prior to that, it was all like, you know, melody and phonetic, and
okay.
Throw the lyric at the wall. If the lyric seems like it fits, then let's go with that, no matter what it might mean. And if it has to mean something first, it's probably going to be about aliens.
Yeah. Well, and that actually dovetails nicely into the next question I was going to ask, because I think it's a prerequisite of everybody that ever speaks to you or the band to be like, dude, UFOs, that's crazy. You like aliens. And, you know, I'm not going to be pedantic about that, because people have, you know, covered that territory very.
I heard there's another dude out there that's in a band, and his name is Tom.
I was literally going to make the joke. How does it feel to be validated by all of the, you know, evidence that has come out to be where it's like, okay, so you've got Jeff Jenkins from Codeseven and you have Tom DeLonge from Blink-182 that are right. Everybody else is wrong.
No, can I tell you something?
Please.
I've never laughed and loved that dude so much as when I saw him wearing a shirt at one of their shows that said something like, "I told you, fuckers," or something like that. Like,
yeah.
I was just like, yes, man. But at the same time, like, he has his own experiences and I have mine. And I think everybody everybody who's ever had an experience has a story to tell. And what's important for me is to allow people, I love talking to people about it. And it feels great being validated to answer your question. But there's still so much more validation to happen. There's still so many more questions to be answered. I personally have my own beliefs and like have had my own experiences. But I think it's so great that you asked that, because like one of the most important things you could have asked me last year in September of last year, late September, everybody's like, hey, Codeseven, we got some new album coming out, right? My mom was like, hey, Codeseven's got a new album coming out. And I'm like, yeah, Mom, that's great. But this Wednesday night, I'm hosting an event at the venue where I work. It's an open mic event where people get to get up and share their own supernatural, spooky stories. It's called Paranormal Night or Paranormal Stories Night. And I host the event and just let people get up there on an open mic in a supportive atmosphere around people who are ready to believe, you know. And the great thing about it is that I'm the guy who gets to ask the skeptical questions. I'm the guy that gets to debunk the story. But I'm not debunking it because I'm your biggest proponent. I'm your biggest believer. But I will ask people who've had those experiences, like the same questions that I had been asked the entire time I was having these. Like someone who's got a skeptical mind would say, hey, you think you saw a ghost? Oh, yeah. Well, how's the electrical in your house? Do you have good wiring in your house? Or had you had anything to smoke or drink that night? Blah, blah, blah. You know, questions like that. Like, you've got a house that makes a lot of noise, like you hear someone walking around your house. Well, do you have a weird heating issue that causes your house, the furnace in your house to bump or crack or whatever, you know?
Right.
And like you saw a UFO. Well, how close do you live to an airport? You know what I mean? Like, you know, things like that. So, you know, it could have been an airplane. It could have been a hot air balloon. But at the end of the day, I'm always the biggest believer, and I always give that person more validation because I believe their story, and everything that I ask them, they can debunk because they know in their mind that it really happened. So,
yeah, no, and I love especially the fact that not only because, you know, there's definitely varying degrees of interest in it. I know generically everybody is like, oh yeah, like, you know, I've thought about the idea of ghosts, or I've thought about the idea of, you know, what aliens would mean. Like everybody's confronted with that in pop culture, but for you to build it, you know, like have a space in which people can, like you said, feel safe. And then also you being the biggest fan of this stuff are asking the questions that need to be asked. And then in turn, people like, oh yeah, Jeff, actually, you know, I did check out the heating and this didn't check out. And you're like, okay, great. I'm glad we covered this.
You know, it's so cool because each year that I've done this, or each time I've done it maybe about 6 years straight now. And each time I've done it, it's always been so cool. It's always gotten so much more. We've always had more people attend. And one of the first couple of times I ever did it, there was a guy, because I have a little sign-up sheet, right? A little clipboard that you sign up and a little blurb about your story so that I can introduce them and bring them to the stage, right? So one of the first times I ever did this, there was a dude there that wrote like bloody hook on a car door as the blurb. And I went up to him and I was like, hey man, is this like a real story, right? It's a true story. And it was something that never occurred to me that I need to be asking people. So that's the one requirement, is that it has to be true. Because like when I told the guy, I was like, hey, this is the same thing as that urban legend. And he was just like, I was like, is this true? Did this happen to you? And he's like, no. And I was like, yeah, you just want to scare everybody with a jump scare, and that's not really cool. So maybe come back and share this story on an open mic night. You know what I mean? Not an open mic night about true paranormal encounters.
Yeah, no, totally. This is not the space. Yeah. The last thing I want to hit on was the fact, like this Codeseven, and I know that, I mean, if I'm the first person that shares this with you, I would be shocked, but Codeseven definitely, especially when you guys were on the road and really, you know, getting yourselves out there, and you definitely were a band's band where you were like, a lot of bands loved you, not only musically, but then enjoyed your company on the road. And you definitely, you know, got put into this space where it's like, oh my gosh, like people were ecstatic when they could play shows with Codeseven in whatever capacity. But then there was the, kind of flip side that sometimes a band like you guys could fit into, where it's like, oh, here's a band's band where it's like, they're not necessarily, and I'm putting like a big business voice on this, where it's like, oh, they're not selling any tickets or whatever, but like, so why are we even putting this band on here? And it's like, oh, well, Poison the Well said we got to tour with them or whatever. And so like, I don't know if that was something that was really in your, sphere of awareness, where people were like, oh my gosh, like we got to take Codeseven on tour. And you're like, well, I don't know if like we're really going to bring anybody like our fans out there or anything like that. Was that something that you, I guess, ever encountered, or is that all me just like sharing brand new information to you?
No, Ray, that's not new. That's definitely something that we had to, that caused a lot of internal conflict in the band, I think, as far as like, should we be doing something to make ourselves more lucrative? I guess the right word, more economically viable.
Sure.
But I think what happened is because we had changed our style from being a heavy band to a band that just sort of made music that seemed to be our path, like we started to integrate sounds that were, not all riff oriented and not, breakdown oriented. I think that's a point at which people thought, well, there's not a market for this, and our target market wasn't who we were playing in front of. Our target market was the people who need these riffs and need these breakdowns. And it just so happened that the bands that we were playing with needed that realism of like, hey, we shouldn't be afraid of what we can do that's not riff oriented, even if what we do is riff and breakdown oriented. And by all means, I absolutely adore things that are riff and breakdown oriented. I love heavy music. And it doesn't matter that the band Codeseven shifted to start doing things that were more mellow, because that's what we wanted. That's not what we thought that it's not what we thought other people should also do. So the fact that other bands were choosing to also try some of those things was just such a great feeling, because it felt like the tide was shifting. Bands like, bands that were our predecessors in making that shift, bands like Cave In, and I can use so many other bands as an example. We were really into indie rock at the time, and like listening to bands like Jawbox and Sunny Day Real Estate and things like that we just thought was pure indie rock. We didn't know that it was this thing called emo. And when emo happened around us, people kind of like, oh, you guys are an emo band, but you're not doing emo music. What is that all about? You're not singing songs about girls. You're singing songs about aliens. And by all means, I've never been a person who felt like I should be, singing to someone's heartstrings rather than just singing to their soul. I feel like, if you want me to sing about a bad breakup, I'm sorry, I don't feel like talking about that. But if you want me to sing about other things that I'm very passionate about, I do love talking about that. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So like the fact that I didn't really have, I didn't have a lot to offer in the way of emotional romanticism. I had a lot to offer in the way of like this, have you ever tried a psychotropic drug before?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think honestly, like what you're saying hits me on a few different levels. One, the fact that because you were playing, left of center stuff, but it still, was able to be contained within the context of a, capital R rock band or whatever, it did encourage other bands to either, be inventive or iterate based on the fact that, you were already out there doing that and it was resonating with people, like not to the degree of like, becoming like, oh, wow, we're going to be the next Muse. Cause I'm sure people absolutely place that on your mantle at one point where it's like, oh yes, here's what's going to happen. But to your point, you are influencing, bands and creators in ways that you never would have been able to if you were obviously, like you said, just oh, you want songs about heartbreak? Like, I can do that, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And I want to also blow your mind, Ray. Here we go. And it just occurred to me when you were saying that. What if we were one of the first dad rock bands? Just nobody knew it was called dad rock back then. You know what I mean? Think about that, huh? Wow. Codeseven was one of the first dad rock bands.
Well, I mean, obviously your Boys of Summer cover leans very much into that world.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I genuinely appreciate your time and thank you for letting me bounce around your brain because, I just have always loved you as a human and admired your work as a musician. So it's great that we could, quote unquote, formalize this conversation for the internet. Yes, that was Jeff. And of course, I could not let a conversation go by without bringing up aliens because that is like what he's known for. Him and Tom DeLonge, the number 1 and 2 people out there just doing the Lord's work in regards to making sure everybody's aware of aliens. But all joking aside, I very much appreciate his time. I very much appreciate Dan Sanshaw at Equal Vision Records for hooking this interview up. He, texted me multiple times being like, hey, let's have Jeff on. I'm like, yes, it's a great idea. Then, dropped the ball once or twice and then we made it happen. So big shout out to all of the friends of the show and my own personal friends as well. So let's talk about what's happening next week. I have Mehi. I'm totally just like butchering Maha Mehi. Anyways, I've totally mispronounced her first name. But I'll say Mehi Shami from No Man. She is the vocalist for No Man, who is an amazing, like Virginia hardcore, punk, like just a really good band. They're putting out their music on Iodine Records. And I was excited to speak to her because she is a Palestinian and she has a very unique point of view in regards to obviously the conflict that's going on over there right now. But then she's also, very tightly ingrained with the Majority Rule guys. Her spouse is one of the members of the band. And she also did a ton of touring with Page 99. She's just been on the ground floor for a lot of cool stuff. And so, I wanted to have her on. And that's what we do next week. So Mehi Shami from No Man. Love it. So until then, please be safe, everybody. The show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Trust me in saying that no matter who you are, mental health challenges can affect you, and how you manage them can make all of the difference. That's why everyone should have access to mental health support that meets them where they are and helps them get through. BetterHelp provides online therapy on your schedule. It's flexible, simple to use, and more affordable than in-person therapy. Connect with a licensed therapist selected just for you. Learn more at betterhelp.com. That's betterhelp.com.
Hey, it's Malcolm Gladwell, host of Revisionist History. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Infiniti presents a new chapter in luxury. The premiere of the all-new 2025 Infiniti QX80. Live March 20th from the Edge at Hudson Yards in New York City. Featuring a performance by John Batiste. The all-new 2025 Infiniti QX80 is an SUV designed to help every passenger feel just right. Be the first to see it March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on iHeartRadio's YouTube channel. Save the date at new-QX80.com. Don't miss it. 2025 QX80 coming this summer.